Hello, comrades. First of all, I just wanted to apologize for basically not making any videos for about a week now. I have a lot of ideas, and I'm actually going to start working on a pretty major video project. But yeah, it's been a very long and busy, difficult week. Health problems, parent problems, university problems, work problems. But that's life. But I mean, yeah, I'm just gonna play some more Thunder and rant a bit, if that's okay with you. Just had like, for like 3 nights in a row, just been having like massive arguments with parents, which is always great fun. But my parents, they're Russian. I mean, I'm Russian, and they lived in the Soviet Union, and they use every opportunity they can get to complain about it and say how horrible it was. And I mean, I get it, I do, and we have very long discussions about it. And as you know, as a Marxist and as a revolutionary, well, not a revolutionary, but a student of revolutionary theory, I guess that sounds a bit better. Um, these conversations can get quite heated, and we have a pretty big problem in our family where everybody's very stubborn and unwilling to listen to everybody else and very keen to interrupt immediately, which is why I don't enjoy these conversations. I normally quite like a good debate and quite a good argument. I'm a very argumentative person, and I use almost every opportunity I can to argue, which a lot of people would say is a flaw, but I'm happy with it because it's fun. Arguing is fun, and it's interesting because you get to see a different person's point of view. That was pretty good. You get to see a different person's point of view, which is always very important. But also you get to practice your skills at arguing, and you get to practice your knowledge of theory, because that's how you learn. It's not just by reading books and listening and watching YouTube videos of from ContraPoint and Philosophy Tube, but it's arguing and commenting on things, and it's talking these things, because that makes you actually think about these subjects and how you want to say them and what they actually mean, which helps you understand them. Which is why I think that arguing and discussing things is very important, especially when it comes to theory. Which is why I think that all the arguing and all the just general um, disunity among leftists is a good thing, because it allows us to enhance our theory, to discuss it, and to to make it better, effectively, in our own minds, so that we better understand it, so we can expand on it and put it into action. But what bothers me the most about these kind of arguments with people, and especially my parents, because they're so far the only ones who I've had this kind of experience with. Okay, I'm dead. It's that whenever I try to argue about socialism or a better future for humanity, basically through revolutionary means, they, at least my father, more precisely, he focuses on the whole nihilism perspective. He says that things are terrible, right? And I get that. But we are privileged, and we have managed to, get a pretty good lot in life. So, yeah, the world is going to shit, and everything is terrible, and people are dying and living horribly. And yes, there's exploitation and horrible shit everywhere. But we managed to make it good for ourselves, and we're doing good. So why would you want to jeopardize that, basically? They're saying that you've got a very good lot in life, you were very privileged. So why would you want to waste that? Why would you want to be purposefully poor, or purposefully isolated from society, an outcast, etc.? When the world is so shit, they're basically saying that, you can't fix it. Everything is horrible. There's no point in trying. That was lovely. And basically, give up, essentially. You need to focus on your education, focus on getting a good job, and you can keep these private theories, but don't try to, talk about them publicly. Don't try to make speeches, don't try to arouse people's attention, don't bring attention to yourself or your silly theories, because that's how you get into trouble. Which I think is a very, very bad way to look at things. It's nihilism, effectively. It's existential nihilism. It's saying things are shit, Ergo, there's no point trying to fix them because human nature is like that. And things will always be shit. You know? We had this massive half-hour long conversation about it. And basically they've shown me over several years that they, even though they grew up in the Soviet Union and they always say that they had to learn about socialism in school, they showed that they have literally zero understanding of socialist theory. And it's not even understanding, it's just basic knowledge of socialism and Marxism, which I know makes me sound like an entitled dickhead, that, oh, you know, I know theory. But theory is important, even in the most basic form, so you have some kind of understanding, which is the basic problem with so many people who criticize socialism, especially people like, you know, Jordan Peterson and all that crowd, that they just have absolutely zero understanding of socialist theory, even in its most basic form, which I think is a very big problem. Oh, nice. And the argument effectively boils down to, you know, we have done well for ourselves, we are relatively wealthy, and you're having an education, you had a very good, prestigious education, and why would you want to waste all that and throw it away and ruin your social status and ruin your potential opportunities and reputation as a you know, successful person for this silly theory that in the past has been proven to not work? Okay, I've lost my tail. Nice. And I think that's hilarious. Because if you admit that everything is shit and there's no point in trying, then what's the point of living? I mean, honestly. Because he's saying, and like, I was talking about a revolution, and he's saying, okay, so the revolution you want is you and your gang want to break into my house, steal my dinner, rob my shit, and kill my family. And I was thinking, okay, that's a little extreme, father. That's not what Marxist theory is about. You know, if his basic understanding of revolutionary theory and Marxism is that I want to break into people's homes and steal their shit, then what's the point of even talking about these things? And people always, and I'm one of the people that always says, arguments are good because you get to educate people about your point of view and bring them about to your way of thinking. But I'm starting to believe that that's not always true, or in fact often isn't true, because a lot of people, especially people of the previous generation, people like our parents, my parents, they've lived their lives and they've become convinced of this one point of view. I'm young. I'm very, very young. I've only just started my life, essentially. And they're saying that, you know, you radicalized very quickly and became very, very radical. So maybe your brain is still, you know, forming, and hopefully eventually you will abandon this silly theory. And maybe I will. We have yet to see what will happen. But just the whole, I'm sorry, I know this is probably doesn't make any sense and I'm talking nonsense, but I just don't understand just the level of complacency and giving up that it takes to just accept that things are bad, so we just gotta leave it like that. There's no point trying to change society for the better. And how can you try to convince these people to change society for the better when they assume that your theory of better involves genocide and robbing people and murdering everybody? It's amazing the kind of levels of propaganda and brainwashing we've reached in our society, where even even the slightest conversation about changing society for the better, the response to that is, oh, you want to rob me and kill my family and make society worse and make everybody equally poor. Which I find amazing. I mean, it's so nonsensical. And about the whole equality thing, you know, Marxism doesn't want to make everybody equal, because that's impossible. It wants to bring equal opportunities and equal chances and equal freedoms to everybody and equal rights. But not to make everybody the same, because that's bullshit, that's pointless, that's ridiculous. And that's what they think, which I find very funny, because they keep telling me that they were brought up in the Soviet system and they understand socialist theory, when they very clearly do not. And they have this problem, which I completely understand, where they cannot disassociate the word socialism or Marxism from the Soviet Union. And I understand that. And I'm not trying to discredit the Soviet Union. Not at all. In fact, I most of the time defend it quite seriously. But the Soviet Union wasn't perfect. The Soviet Union had a lot of flaws. And a lot of those flaws were some of the reasons that the Soviet Union fell in the end. And we must understand that and recognize that as Marxists. The Soviet Union was not perfect. The Soviet Union is not some kind of magnum opus of socialist theory and should not be held up as such. It should not be held up as the only way, as the only theory, as the only kind of practical example of a functioning social society, because it wasn't. It was deeply flawed. There were very, very many problems. But there are so many considerations that have to go into it. The history of Russia, Russian culture, Russian industry at the time of the revolution. So many factors. And then, of course, the Second World War, which devastated the Soviet Union like no war had ever done to any country. And it was a very bad place to try to build socialism. And it worked for a while, more or less. It was an experiment, the same way that and it fell, like many other socialist states have fallen. In the same way that when capitalism first started to grow and tried to replace feudalism as the dominant system of power and economics in Europe, the first capitalist states, like the first Dutch Republic, were crushed violently for trying to change the order and try to make a different kind of society. A society which they thought would be better that way. And it's a similar kind of thing here. Yes, the Soviet Union has fallen. Yes, many socialist nations have fallen, and others have degenerated. And others have abandoned the path towards socialism and have had other issues of their own. But that doesn't mean that the theory is invalid. These are just the early stages. These are the early stages of experimentation. And the problem is that socialism as a theory has existed for quite a while now. And whenever you start to comment about the actual decay of capitalism and how this is really the point where it's becoming extremely dire and serious in terms of climate and economics and automation and just so many different factors, the very common response, which is what I heard from my mother, was we've been hearing this for decades. You know, the argument that this is the time, this is the last crisis of capitalism, this is the final step towards revolution throughout the world, this is the final kind of the last vestiges of capitalism that remain. Yeah, sorry, they came into the room. I mean, I know I sound like a child now who's trying to like fight against his parents, but I mean, we are fucked, right? Like as a generation, my generation, Generation Z or whatever the hell you want to call it, we are extremely boned, cause the world is going to shit, and like in a way that it hasn't before, and in many ways actually that have never happened before. And I think the two main factors are automation and accelerated climate change. Never in the history of capitalism have these two things been an actual, tangible, foreseeable threat to humanity. And they're not like a foreseeable threat, they're an actual existing threat right now that is currently in the process of happening. Automation is replacing jobs all over the world and making the working class redundant and obsolete. And climate change has literally reached a point of no return, where it is irreparably damaging our climate and our atmosphere to the point that future generations will just not be able to live here anymore. And the lack of will to try something different, to try to change society somewhat, is astonishing and disgusting. You know, it always reminds me of the meme of the, oh wow, that was very nice, of the people throughout the ages. You know, we should improve society somewhat, yet you live in a society, checkmate. You know, it's exactly like that. That was literally the argument we had today. You know, like how can you talk about socialism when you have never seen or felt real poverty, or you grew up in a prestigious school, you know? And when a lot of the people I know whose families are actually, you know, responsible for a lot of suffering in the working class all over the world, undeniably. And how can I try to, you know, kind of take an opposite position to that? And it's a good point. It's a good point. Because I am a hypocrite, and I am a champagne socialist, because I live a comfortable life, and I always have. I never knew true suffering and true difficulties. it's true. Which may make a lot of people feel that my theory, or at least the theory I support, is hypocritical, and my stance, my entire kind of position, my entire field of thought is hypocritical and ironic and contradictory and paradoxical, and that I should have, and I have no right to hold it. And I think that that's a very bad way of thinking about it, which of course, again, you might contribute to my hypocrisy of my position. But on a different note, I grew up with a lot of privilege, and I have a lot of privilege right now. I live in a warm house, I eat warm meals every day, I have internet, I have a very good computer, I have hygiene, I have health, well, some health. I've actually been plagued by health problems throughout my whole life, ironically. But I have everything that would be considered upper class, essentially. And therefore, how can I take the position of anything other? You know, how can I claim to support a class that I was never a part of? How can I claim to support a revolution that is contradictory to my historical life and my upbringing and my family's life? Well, not family's life, but my family's, careers and experiences in life. And they even said that, like, if we had been, instead of what we became, if we had been arms smugglers or arms dealers, would you have just, like, left the family? And of course, I had to say yes. And I don't know if I actually would have, but I like to think that I would have, because from an ideological sense. And you know, funny thing, this all started because we were talking about Elon Musk, which is amazing, because he's a fucking scumbag. And my mother sees him as some kind of prodigy, genius, world saver guy. And I couldn't stand for that shit, so of course that's what started the argument. And yeah, eventually we ended up on the whole champagne socialism bit. And yeah, and they're basically saying that, like, you know, if we amass a vast amount of money, would you not want to inherit that? And I said no. And they said, all right, that settles it. Because I don't believe in inheritance. I believe inherited money is wrong. It's there's a lot of things to say about it, and I don't want to go into it because I'm tired and quite upset, and I might go sleep. But I don't know, I just wanted to talk for a bit, rant a bit, play some more Thunder, get shut down a bunch. It's just that this is a kind of mindset that is plaguing every leftist. Not every leftist, but a lot of leftists in the Western world. That everything is shit. And that nothing is worth trying to change. Because conditions are bad, and that the kind of structures of oppression that have built up in our society are unchangeable. And that there's no point trying to change them. That's the view of many leftists in America, and I see a lot of them online, and I've spoken to people like that who weren't even American. Just this view that the world is shit, and capitalism has become so monumental that, and so powerful, that there's no point even trying to fight it. And I think that that's the most pathetic response imaginable, because it's defeatism. It's giving up. It's saying that shit's fucked, there's nothing we can do. It's nihilism. It's what I started talking with. It's nihilism, and nihilism is stupid. Nihilism is something that you believe in when you're 14 years old and you're depressed. That's at least was my experience. Nihilism is pointless, because it means that nothing can get better. Or that you will do nothing to make things get better because you believe that nothing can get better. Oh, nice, MiG-3. And I think that that is pointless. I really, really do. Because if we have nothing to hope for, if we have nothing to build towards, then what's even the fucking point of living? What's the point of having a society at all if we don't try to improve it? And I don't mean like improve like social democracy, like voting for Bernie fucking Sanders. I mean like actually radically improve society for the better. If we don't try to do that, then what's the point of anything that we do? I mean, honestly. At least that's how I feel about it. Yeah. Just I read all this theory and I try to read about it online and I watch videos and I try to educate myself as much as I can on this theory to understand its flaws, but also to understand its logic and its thinking. And it's difficult. Reading theory is difficult, and I understand all these people online who say that we don't have time to read hundreds of books, or some people are disabled and can't read books, or other issues like that, or just poverty. And I understand that. I do. I really do. Reading theory is not the most important thing. But what is important is understanding that the world doesn't have to be this way. That this is not the only available path that we as a human race can have, really. That we can make our own future that will work for people instead of for capital. And there have been efforts to do that, and most of them have failed so far. It's true. But does that mean we stop trying? Does that mean we just roll over and fucking die? That's what my parents think we should do, and that makes me very angry. Okay, I'm about to die. That makes me very, very upset, because it's defeatist. It's giving up. Because they've built a family, they've built a more or less successful life for them. Oh, fuck. And they want to live comfortably and for their children to live comfortably. And I get that. I get that. I understand why you would want that. Why most people would want that. Because it's a basic human need and a human right to feel safe and comfortable for yourself and your family. That's a necessity. It's a human need. But once you have that, or once you aim for that, it doesn't mean you should abandon all hope for humanity, or abandon any attempts to reform society or to make it better for everybody else. I don't want to call it selfishness, because it's not really selfishness. It's a natural instinct to care for yourself and your own. And there's nothing inherently wrong with that on its own. It's what comes after that. It's once you have that, you have the choice to either try to work for a better society and to help others around you to organize and to build and to develop theory and develop lives, or to just focus your life on accumulating as much profit as you can before you die. That's, I feel, the big difference. Because they were saying to me that, most people don't care about theory or revolution or anything of the sort. They just want to live comfortably. And it's true. And that's fine. But the thing is, most people don't get to make that choice. They don't get to live comfortably. They don't get to decide that. Because they live in a shitty society where they have no choice or opportunity. And shouldn't we try to change that? Should we give up and just throw in the towel, not even try to do anything anymore? Because most socialist revolutions have been crushed or have failed. And capitalism is the predominant force. And because the previous generation is getting old now, I don't know. That's, I guess, the takeaway from this. I don't know. I'm still completely convinced in the theory that I have chosen for myself. 100%, at least for now. But I don't know what the solution is to these problems. Because nobody does. Because no theory is perfect. No theory claims to be the solution for all of mankind's problems, because that's impossible. Oh, for fuck's sake, why would you do that? But at least this theory that I subscribe to, it can be a stepping stone, I suppose. That's the closest thing I can describe it as. A stepping stone, a doorway into a better future for humanity, as a species. Not as different countries or races or religions, or even fucking corporations at this point, but as all of humanity. Yeah. I know this is just a incoherent, unstructured rant, but yeah, I just wanted to talk. Because it's difficult to think about these things. And I'm only 19, and I haven't had to deal with many problems in life. I've gone through a lot of severe personal issues. Severe. And yeah, they're first world problems. No doubt. But they are still problems, and they are still real, and they still deeply affected my life. In a very real way. So, and I feel like that doesn't make them invalid. And the fact that I'm a champagne socialist and the fact that I've always had privilege and comfort doesn't mean that I can't at least have a good point, or at least struggle, or at least try to work at least some part of my life towards the betterment of society and people's conditions in it. Because again, if we don't try to at least do that, then what's the fucking point? Right? What's the point of doing anything? What's the point of trying? What's the point of building a company? What's the point of having a country? What's the point of having a government, a welfare state, a police force, a fire department? What's the point of all of those things if your society isn't focused on trying to improve the lives of people? Because if that's not it, then I don't know what is. Because sure as hell the society we have right now, it's not doing great. It's not good for the people living in it. It's really not. And from my understanding, from my readings, and from my conversations with real people, I've only become more and more convinced that this theory, in all of its developments, is the only way that we can, save our race, Because people talk about saving the planet, right? But that's an empty statement, because our planet is not going anywhere, right? It's been here for 4.5 billion years. And it'll be here for another 4.5 billion years. But we won't. And that's the thing, we shouldn't be saying save the planet, because that's not the point of environmentalism. We don't want to save the planet, we want to save ourselves, goddammit. We want to save our children and our future generations. Because the way it's going now, my generation, the generations of my younger brothers and sister, and my kids, if I have kids, and their kids, they're gonna be living in a very, very bad world. Even just considerably, objectively worse than the one we have now. And I don't know if that's a good thing, because my parents, especially my father, is like, I just want to ensure that my kids have a comfortable future. But how can they if our planet is getting destroyed? And people are getting destroyed, and economies are getting destroyed, and just entire classes of people are getting suppressed, and it's a tricky situation, no doubt, and I'm not the first to say it. But yeah, I guess I just wanted to rant a bit and express some thoughts, so that's it, I guess. Thanks for listening. Peace.